Snow hammered against the windshield like shards of ice. The highway was a blur of white, wind howling like it wanted to tear the world apart. Ben Walker, 35, single dad and small-town mechanic, gripped the wheel as his old Ford fought through the storm. He wasn't supposed to be out there. But when a faint glow of hazard lights flickered through the snowbank, he couldn't drive past, not with his little girl whispering, "Daddy, someone might need help." He stopped. He didn't think, he acted. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Snow came down like shards of glass, glittering under the dying headlights of Ben Walker's old Ford. The wipers fought a losing battle, smearing frost instead of clearing it. His daughter, Ella, 8 years old and half asleep in the back seat, murmured through the hum of the heater, "Daddy, are we almost home?" "Almost, sweetheart," he said, though even he couldn't see the road ahead. The world outside had turned into a white wall, empty, endless, merciless. He was about to turn back when something flickered through the storm, a faint red glow off the shoulder of the road. Hazard lights. Buried deep in snow. His gut tightened. "Hang on," he muttered, easing the truck to a stop. The wind hit him like a fist the second he stepped out. "Hello?" he shouted into the chaos, boots crunching through the drift. A black sedan sat half-submerged in the ditch, its engine silent. Through the window, a woman sat motionless, her face pale, her breath fogging the glass in weak bursts. "Ma'am." Ben yanked the door open. The woman barely stirred, her fingers stiff on the wheel. "You're gonna freeze out here." Without thinking, he slid off his coat, wrapped it around her shoulders, and lifted her into his arms. By the time he got her back to the truck, Ella was wide awake, eyes wide as saucers. "Is she okay?" Ben's voice was calm, steady, the way fathers' voices get when they're scared. "She will be." As the heater roared and snow swallowed the world outside, Ben realized this night, this stranger, had just changed everything. The highway had vanished beneath a sheet of white. Ben drove slow, headlights cutting through the storm like weak flashlights under water. The woman in the passenger seat sat silent, wrapped in his coat, her trembling hands clutching the thermos of coffee Ella had passed from the back seat. "Try to sip it," Ben said softly. "You're lucky I came through this road, not many would tonight." Her voice was hoarse, almost fragile. I thought I could make it to the next town. GPS said 20 minutes. It's been hours." Ben nodded, eyes on the winding road. "Storms don't listen to GPS." A faint laugh escaped her, the kind that sounded like it had been buried a long time. When they finally spotted the glowing neon sign of a roadside diner, Harper's Grill, open 24 hours, it felt like a miracle. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and fried potatoes. The waitress, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s, stared at them as they came in, a drenched man, a sleepy little girl, and a woman who looked like she'd walked out of another world. Ben guided the stranger to a booth near the heater. Ella slid in beside her, offering half her cookie. "You look cold," she said simply. The woman blinked, startled. "Thank you." Ben sat across from them, rubbing his hands together. "I'm Ben Walker," he said. "This here's Ella." "You got a name, ma'am?" She hesitated, then whispered. "Rachel. Rachel Myers." Ben smiled faintly. "Well, Rachel Myers, looks like tonight you've been rescued by the slowest tow truck in Montana." For the first time, Rachel smiled, small, tired, but real. Outside, the snow kept falling, but in that tiny booth, warmth had already begun to return. By the time the storm eased, dawn had begun to bleed pale gold through the diner's frosted windows. The world outside looked untouched, soft, quiet, and cold. Inside, the smell of coffee lingered as Ella colored on a napkin while Ben leaned back in the booth, watching their rescued stranger regain some color in her cheeks. Rachel's hands had stopped trembling, but her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that came from more than just a long night. She set her cup down gently. "You really didn't have to stop," she said, her voice steady now. "Most people would have just driven by." Ben shrugged. My dad used to say, if someone's stranded, you don't ask who they are till they're warm. Guess it stuck. Something in her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise, then guilt. You're a mechanic, right? She asked, noticing the grease stains still faint on his knuckles. Yeah. Small-town garage, nothing fancy. Cars, tractors, the occasional snowblower. You. Rachel hesitated, eyes dropping to the steam curling from her mug. I work in engineering, management mostly. She said it too carefully, like she was hiding behind the word. Before Ben could ask more, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside the diner, headlights slicing through the haze. A man in a dark suit stepped out, brushing snow from his shoulders before hurrying in. His eyes locked on Rachel immediately. Ms. Myers! We've been trying to reach you all night. Ben's brow furrowed. Ms. Myers? The man turned to him. Sir, thank you for assisting our CEO. You have no idea what trouble this storm's caused for the company. Ben froze, the words landing like a hammer. CEO. Engineering. Company. He looked back at Rachel. She met his gaze with quiet embarrassment. I wanted to tell you, she said softly. But last night, I just needed to be human. Ben nodded slowly. Guess storms don't care about titles. Outside, the sky brightened, and with it, something unseen began to shift between them. Ben didn't expect to see her again. After that morning at the diner, Rachel had been whisked away in her sleek SUV, swallowed by the world she belonged to, the one of glass towers, deadlines, and money that never slept. For him, life returned to its usual rhythm, coffee at dawn, grease under his nails, and Ella's laughter echoing through the small garage between customers. But the next morning, as he was tightening a bolt under a rusted pickup, the growl of a black luxury vehicle broke through the quiet. He slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a rag, and froze. Rachel Myers stepped out, no longer the fragile woman from the blizzard. Today, she looked every inch the CEO, tailored coat, confident stride, the air around her humming with purpose. Ms. Myers, Ben said, straightening. Didn't expect to see you in my corner of town. She smiled faintly. Just Rachel, please. And I had to thank you properly. You saved my life. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Just did what anyone would have done. Her eyes softened. You keep saying that, but it's not true. Most people don't stop in the middle of a blizzard for a stranger. From the office window, Ella peeked out, her face smudged with marker ink. Dad, that's the lady from the snow, she called. Rachel laughed quietly. You have a wonderful daughter. Yeah, Ben said with pride. She keeps me grounded. Rachel hesitated, then pulled a sleek folder from her bag. Ben, I've looked into your garage, your work, your record, your reviews. You're good. Really good. I'd like to offer you something more than just thanks. A position at Myers Engineering, lead mechanic at our facility here in Montana. Full benefits. Better hours. Housing included. Ben stared at her, unsure he'd heard right. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a new start, she said softly. Not out of pity, because I believe people like you can fix more than machines. You can fix what's broken in people too. Ben didn't answer right away. He looked at Ella, at the life he'd built, fragile but theirs, and then at Rachel, the woman who looked at him not as a worker, but as an equal. For the first time in years, he felt something stir, hope. That night, the offer sat on Ben's kitchen table like a glowing secret. The contract folder, slick and expensive, looked out of place among coffee rings, crayon drawings, and half-fixed toy cars. Ella sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly as she drew. Her voice broke the silence. Daddy, are we moving? Ben blinked, caught off guard. Who told you that? She pointed to the folder. You keep looking at that paper like it's scary. He chuckled quietly. Maybe it is. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world washed clean under the silver moonlight. Ben stared out the window, thinking about everything Rachel had said. Better pay. stability. A chance to give Ella more than scrape together bills and cold dinners. But it also meant leaving the little garage he'd built with his own hands, and stepping into a world that didn't play by his rules. When Ella finally fell asleep on the couch, he sat alone, tracing his finger over Rachel's business card. Myers Engineering Group. Even the name sounded unreachable. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Ben Walker. Rachel's voice came through, softer than before. Sorry for calling this late. I just wanted to say, don't rush your decision. I know what it's like to be afraid of change. But sometimes, staying put costs more than moving forward. Ben smiled faintly. You always talk like that, or is it the CO training? She laughed softly. Maybe a little of both. He glanced at the sleeping form of his daughter, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. I just don't want to drag her into something I can't control, he said quietly. Rachel's tone gentled. Maybe that's what makes you a good father, you think before you leap. But Ben, sometimes courage isn't about fighting storms. It's about walking towards something better, even if it scares you. The line went quiet. Ben looked again at the folder, then at the photo on the fridge, him and Ella, smiling through the grease and sunlight. He exhaled slowly. Maybe it's time. The morning air bit at Ben's cheeks as he stood outside the Myers Engineering campus, a sprawling complex of glass, steel, and motion. Trucks rumbled through the gates, engineers hurried by with tablets, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. It was nothing like his quiet garage back home. Ella clung to his hand, her small eyes wide as she looked up at the gleaming building. Daddy, she whispered, this place looks like a robot lives here. Ben smiled. Maybe a few. Inside, everything gleamed, spotless floors, screens displaying digital blueprints, and people who looked too polished to ever need a wrench. Ben felt every speck of grease he'd ever touched clinging to his memory. Rachel met them in the lobby, her voice warm but professional. Welcome to Myers Engineering, Mr. Walker. He raised an eyebrow. You told me to call you Rachel. Right, she said with a small laugh. Old habits. Her eyes softened as she glanced at Ella. You must be the famous artist I've heard about. Ella grinned shyly and held up her drawing, a stick-figure man fixing a big machine beside a smiling woman. Above it, in shaky handwriting, Daddy helps everyone. Rachel took it like it was a priceless gift. That might have to go on our office wall, she said. She gave them a tour, the labs, the workshop bays, the massive hangar filled with prototypes. Engineers nodded respectfully as they passed, some whispering when they realized who Ben was, the man the CEO herself had personally recruited. When they reached his new workspace, a spacious, fully equipped shop with tools he'd only dreamed of, Ben stopped cold. This can't all be for me, he said quietly. Rachel smiled. You earned it the night you stopped in that storm. He turned to her, humbled. I didn't do it for a reward. I know, she said softly. That's why you deserve one. For the first time in a long time, Ben felt something shift deep inside, not luck, not charity, but purpose. He looked around the shining room, then down at Ella's hand in his. Guess it's time to get to work. Ben quickly learned that a gleaming shop didn't mean an easy job. The first week at Myers Engineering felt like stepping onto another planet, one powered by precision, deadlines, and people who measured worth in degrees and data. His hands were built for torque wrenches, not touch screens. And though Rachel had given him the title lead mechanical consultant, most of the staff saw something else, a blue-collar outsider who didn't belong. On his third day, a project manager named Lucas Pierce cornered him in the prototype bay. Mr. Walker, he said, his tone too polite to be friendly. We usually prefer engineers with, formal training. Ben kept his voice even. Yeah? Well, I usually prefer engines that start the first time. A few techs stifled laughs, and Lucas flushed. Just don't touch anything without clearance. That night, Ben stayed late, checking the half-finished prototypes lined up under white covers. One caught his eye, A compact turbine with a flicker of light pulsing wrong in its core. Instinct told him something wasn't right. He leaned in, tracing a wire connection. "That's gonna fail," he murmured. "Then fix it," came Rachel's voice behind him. He turned, startled. She stood in the doorway, her usual calm softened by exhaustion. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Didn't mean to." "Ben," she interrupted gently, stepping closer. "I hired you because you see what others miss. Don't apologize for that." Her faith in him felt heavier than any tool he'd ever lifted. He worked through the night, recalibrating the design. By dawn, the turbine hummed perfectly, smooth as a heartbeat. When the engineers arrived that morning and saw the readings, silence filled the room. Even Lucas could only mutter, "How did he?" Rachel stood beside Ben, her expression unreadable except for the faintest hint of pride. "Because sometimes," she said quietly, "experience builds what textbooks can't." And just like that, the whispers changed tone, from doubt to something closer to respect. But Ben didn't notice the glances. He just looked at the quiet hum of the turbine and thought, maybe I do belong here after all. By the second month, Ben's name had spread through the company, the mechanic who fixed what their engineers couldn't. Some admired him. Others didn't. Respect came quietly, but resentment came louder. Rumors began to circulate, whispers that Rachel had hired him for personal reasons, that she was making emotional decisions. Ben pretended not to hear, but he saw the looks in the break room, the sudden silence when he entered. One afternoon, he found Rachel in the executive wing, standing by a window that overlooked the entire factory floor. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from fighting invisible wars. "They're saying things," he said quietly. "About me. About you." She turned, expression calm but weary. "They always do when someone breaks the pattern." "Still," Ben said, "I don't want you catching heat for giving me a chance." Rachel gave a faint smile. "You think this is the first time I've been questioned? Ben, I've built this company by trusting people who earn their place, not the ones who demanded it." Her confidence should have reassured him, but something else lingered in her eyes, worry, maybe even loneliness. Later that week, during a board presentation, a senior executive tried to corner her. "With all due respect to Ms. Myers," he said pointedly, "your recruit may be capable with tools, but not with corporate politics. We can't run an empire on goodwill and intuition." Rachel's tone was ice. "Goodwill and intuition just saved this company millions last quarter. Unless you can do better, I suggest you watch and learn." That night, when Ben returned to the workshop, he found Rachel sitting by the prototype he'd repaired weeks earlier. She looked up as he approached, her voice quiet. "I shouldn't have to defend you, but I will." He shook his head. "You shouldn't have to defend anyone." For a long moment they stood there, two people from different worlds, bound by something neither had planned, respect built on kindness, and courage disguised as decency. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, familiar. Rachel glanced toward the window and said softly, "You know, sometimes storms don't end. They just move inside." Ben smiled faintly. "Then we'll fix those too." It started with a single alarm on the control board, a red flash in the testing bay that sent technicians running. Ben was the first to reach it. The turbine he'd helped repair months ago was running too hot, dangerously so. One wrong move, and months of work, not to mention millions in investment, would go up in flames. He hit the emergency shutoff, but the system refused to respond. "Manual override!" he shouted, grabbing a wrench and running toward the control panel. The heat radiating off the machine felt like standing too close to the sun. Rachel burst into the room, flanked by executives. "Ben, what's happening?" He didn't look up. "Someone tampered with the pressure seals. This isn't a malfunction, it's sabotage." Gasps echoed around the room. Rachel's voice hardened. "Can you stop it?" "Maybe. But everyone needs to get back." The turbine shrieked, sparks flying as bolts rattled loose. Ben ducked beneath the frame, sweat stinging his eyes, and yanked the emergency release with both hands. A hiss of air escaped, and the machine finally groaned to a halt. Silence fell, broken only by the slow tick of cooling metal. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rachel was beside him, helping him to his feet. "You're insane," she whispered, half scolding, half in awe. He grinned weakly. "My kid says that too." But the relief didn't last. Later that evening, in the boardroom, the security report arrived. The sabotage had come from inside, and the access code used belonged to Ben Walker. Rachel's face went pale. "That's impossible." The head of operations crossed his arms. "The logs don't lie. He's a liability, Rachel. I told you from the start." Ben stood at the doorway, having heard every word. "If you think I'd risk lives, hers, this company's, then you don't know me at all," he said quietly. Rachel looked torn. Her instincts screamed trust. The board demanded proof. "Ben," she said softly, "let me handle this." He nodded, eyes full of hurt but no anger. "You already have." Then he walked out, past the cold stairs, past the walls that once felt like opportunity, and into the snow that waited outside like an old friend. For the first time since that stormy night, he felt lost again. The next morning, the storm had returned, gray, heavy, relentless. But this time, it wasn't snowing outside. It was inside the walls of Myers Engineering. Rachel hadn't slept. She sat in her office surrounded by reports, security footage, and her own racing thoughts. Ben's face wouldn't leave her mind, the disappointment in his eyes when he said, "You already have." Something about the timeline didn't fit. The access code used in the sabotage had been entered during a meeting, one Ben had been in, on camera, standing beside her. He couldn't have done it. Someone had set him up. When she finally traced the logs back, her chest tightened. Lucas Pierce, the same project manager who'd doubted Ben from day one. He'd rerouted Ben's credentials through the system to cover his own failed modifications. Rachel didn't wait. She stormed into the boardroom mid-session, the wind from the hallway still clinging to her coat. "I know who sabotaged the turbine," she announced. Then, with one tap on the tablet, the evidence played out, timestamps, footage, data. Silence followed, then murmurs. Lucas paled, words failing him as security escorted him out. When it was done, Rachel didn't stay to bask in victory. She drove straight to the outskirts of town, to a small garage with a flickering neon sign that read Walker Auto Repairs. Ben was outside, fixing an old snowplow, his jacket dusted with frost. When he saw her car pull up, he froze, wiping his hands on a rag but saying nothing. She stepped out, her voice unsteady for the first time in years. "You were right, Ben. About everything. Lucas framed you. He's gone." Ben looked down at the wrench in his hand. "Doesn't change the fact that they believed him." Rachel's eyes glistened. "I didn't. Not really. I was just too scared to say it." He met her gaze, tired, guarded, but softening. "You're not the only one who gets scared." Behind them, the garage door creaked open, and Ella peeked out, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "It's cold," she said. "You both should come inside." Rachel hesitated, then smiled. "We could use that." Later, as they sat around the small workbench with steam curling from their cups, Rachel looked at him. "You didn't just fix that turbine, Ben. You fixed something in me too. I forgot that leadership starts with trust and kindness." He smiled faintly. "Guess storms teach everyone something." Outside, the first rays of sun broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the snow-covered fields. Rachel watched the light spill in and whispered, "You know, I thought you saved me that night." Ben chuckled. "Pretty sure we saved each other." And as the warmth filled the small garage, the storm, the real one, finally broke for good. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.